Chapter 20, The Concrete Jungle. Why Level 11 Isn't What You Think. The darkness around me faded as I regained consciousness in the middle of a massive city, the buildings and skyscrapers seeming to reach for the pale blue sky as a cool breeze swept through the landscape. I stared in awe at the massive clusters of buildings around me, completely forgetting my hunger and pain as I stumbled forwards to get a better view. Holy shit, I gasped as I slowly turned a full circle in one spot. My mind filled with feelings of shock and curiosity as I stared at the hundreds of massive buildings stretching on around me. I staggered back, almost tripping over a metal rail behind me as I continued to gawk over the buildings around me. I snapped out of it and looked around, my eyes exploring the massive cracked roads as they wound around the city. Broken streetlights lined crumbling sidewalks as random bits of trash scattered themselves throughout the streets. "What the hell is this place?" I said as I turned to face the rail I almost tripped on. The deteriorating sign above the tunnel downwards read, "The Backways." That's what that place was? I choked as I backed away from the metal barricade, watching the darkness inside the staircase down with paranoia and fear. "I'm not going back down to that horrible level," I said as I began to run, turning my back to the tunnel leading down to the forgotten metro as I sprinted down the empty streets. "I need to leave this horrible place. I don't care if this level is a safe level. I just want to go home," I said as tears began racing down my cheeks. My heart pounded as my feet slapped the road's concrete 2-minute record again. My heart pounded as my feet slapped the road's cracked asphalt, leaving a trail of tears behind me as I tried to run from my problems. My vision blurred as I began to cry harder, continuing to run straight ahead as my head filled with thoughts of going home. "I want to leave. I don't know what I did or why I'm here, but I don't like this place. I don't want to be here anymore, and I never want to come back," I sobbed as I slowed to a stop. My heart pounded in my chest as I took a few shaky breaths in. "I want food and water," I mumbled softly as my stomach growled loudly. I glanced around the desolate cityscape around me to see a door leading into a nearby building. "Maybe this place has supplies inside the buildings," I mumbled sadly as I began to walk over to the closed gray-colored door ahead of me. The sounds of wind filled the air as a feeling that I was not alone anymore began to set in. "Is someone there?" I called, looking around before running straight for the door. The sounds of my feet on the road surface was all I heard as I slowed down in front of the door, quickly grabbing the handle as I pulled it open. The door hinges screamed loudly, sending chills down my spine as I turned around, searching for any signs of life before slipping into the building. "This place is so eerie already," I said as I let the door slam shut behind me. A cold draft swept around me as I slowly walked down the empty hallway. The white-colored walls were full of cracks and holes. The ceiling was crumbling and some of it was missing, really. "I don't really think it's safe here. Isn't like 90% of this an OSHA violation already?" I said as I glanced behind me. A massive chunk of ceiling laying on the floor was now left. In the past, the sparks flew from the light fixtures. The smell of dust and mold filled the air as I turned to face another door. I hesitated before pulling the handle, jiggling it before sighing. "Locked," I muttered as I stared at the cracked wooden door in resentment. I took a deep breath before looking around for something to break the door down with. I gasped as my eyes fell on a rusted sledgehammer on the ground, covered by a chunk of ceiling tiles that lay abandoned in the hallway to deteriorate over time. I walked over to it and picked it up, getting my hand covered in dust and drywall in the process. "Well, I hope this works," I said as I raised the hammer in the air, bringing it down on the center of the door with a loud crunch. The wood splintered outwards, revealing a main chamber on the first floor. "There's furniture here?" I cried as I began smashing down the door with the sledgehammer. My eyes locked on the old 1990s-style sofa and table ahead. I swung the sledgehammer over and over until a hole I could squeeze through was formed. "That means there has to be supplies, too," I exclaimed as I burst through the splintered wood and entered the main lobby. I ran over to the sofa and looked around in awe. The inside of the room I was in was filled with 1980s to 1990s styles furniture. A thick layer of dust settling over everything as age swallowed the building whole. The air was dense and filled with dust and debris, giving a thin, cloudy look to everything. An empty elevator shaft blocked over with rusty metal bars lay to my right, confirming the building had more accessible floors somewhere. I ran over to what looked like a desk and stared in awe at the mass amount of items littering the desk drawers and surface. "Almond water!" I cried as I reached over the dusty wooden table part of the desk and grabbed a half-full bottle of almond water. The plastic container itself filled me with relief and joy as I removed the cap. The sweet smell of the liquid tickled my nose as I brought the bottle to my lips and took a swig. Holy shit, I needed that, I said as my body relaxed. My head stopped spinning as my stomach settled for the time being, content with the cool, refreshing liquid. "There has to be more," I said as I ran around the corner of the desk, entering the little space inside as I pulled open the top drawer. A set of 2 batteries rolled to the front of the compartment as I gasped loudly. "Batteries?" I grabbed them instantly and dropped them in my pockets, hoping to find a backpack soon so I could carry things easier as I opened the next 2 drawers. I sifted through the piles of papers covered in unidentifiable symbols and words before shutting the bottom drawer, letting out a sigh of worry as I realized materials were here but still scarce on this level. I stood back up and scanned the top of the desk for resources. "Nothing," I muttered as I stared at a pile of papers in front of me. "This place seems weird, though." I scratched my head. Like it once had people here. I picked up one of the papers from the top of the pile and stared at the unidentifiable language it was written in. But not people. Other people. Some other species with its own language and way of life. I had a yawn. Damn. I set the paper back on the desk again before looking at the area around me. There is no way all of this just spawned in by itself, I muttered as I stared at the 1980s style furniture in the room that filled the room I was in. I began to walk over to the dust-covered sofa in the center of the room as I took in my surroundings. The walls of the lobby were a pale white, the pasty cream-colored wallpaper peeling and cracking in some areas as the smell of rotting plywood filled the air. The floor was made up of The floor was made up of cold white tile that was full of cracks and chunks of missing material. The air was cold and heavy, and the entire place smelled like aged ceramic glass and rotting wood. 7th recording of the day. I'm running out of air. Jesus Christ. The lights that littered the ceiling resembled old office building fixtures with dim white fluorescent lighting hanging off of them. The furniture all looked right out of the 1980s as it was covered in a thick layer of dust. "Well, at least it's something," I muttered as I plopped down on the dusty sofa. A cloud of dust billowed from the sofa cushions as my body put weight on the old, untouched furniture. I sneezed as the dust filled my nose, jerking my head forwards as I sneezed again. "Shit," mumbled as I scrunched up my nose. The dust slowly settled back down around me as I stared at the broken elevator shaft. The metal gate blocking off the elevator was almost completely covered in rust and was missing entire pieces in some areas. This building has other floors, I guess. It seems like that from the elevator I'm seeing. That could mean more supplies and rooms, I said as I slowly rose from the couch I was sitting on. More dust floated in the air as I walked across the lobby towards the elevator shaft. I stopped at the rusted metal gate and peered down the shaft below. The deep chute down seemingly held no end or elevator, and was filled with shadows and mold. "Well, I'm not getting anywhere with that," I said as I stepped away from the useless tunnel down in front of me. I turned around and began scanning the lobby for signs of a stairwell, only to find nothing. "So there is no other way to the other floors, then," I said as I came to the realization that the entire building was made up of one floor, consisting of the lobby and back hallways I had entered through. "Well, there are other buildings. There was no front..." I went ahead. I said as I began making my way to the shattered door I had entered through. There was no front door and the entire lobby held no windows. Sorry? Man, my body's, attacking me. I've been reading for the past 3 hours now. I released 8 videos going all the way up to July 5th. I feel pretty accomplished, and it's only 12 o'clock in the morning. I quickly made my way back outside and looked around, searching for any threats or supplies that could be laying around somewhere. What the fuck you mean threats or Okay, I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm done after this chapter. Jesus Christ. This place is abandoned. There's nothing here, not even any trees or plant life. Sad as I stared at the dull concrete cityscape around me. The road ahead stretched on in both directions, branching off as it wound through the lifeless cityscape that made up the level. So I'm the only thing here, I said as feelings of despair and sadness began to set in. I began walking down the road, scanning the barren buildings around me as I searched for supplies and resources. The air grew heavy as the smell of aged asphalt and crumbling concrete filled the air around me. Does this place have a night cycle? I said as I watched the barren landscape grow darker in front of me. The warm, heavy air slowly grew... Sorry, I'm looking ahead because I know what's coming, I said as I watched the barren landscape grow darker in front of me. The warm, heavy air slowly grew cold as the ground became covered in shadows. This doesn't seem right. I should find somewhere to rest for the night, I said as I began to run, aiming for a building at the end of the road as I was on as... Damn! At the end of the road I was on as the bright blue sky became a dull gray within minutes. The sounds of whispers surrounded me as I sprinted down the empty street to the front of the building ahead. 2 pages, and then I can finally go to sleep. Damn, I am so prepared to go to sleep and then record tomorrow night, if I feel like it, You only record when you're having fun. That's the YouTube way. But to continue. I don't know if any of these entity things come out when this place hits its apparent nighttime, but I don't want to stick around to find out. I cried as my feet slapped the asphalt. The air became thick and freezing cold as the sky grew dark, turning a dull, lifeless gray as an eerie fog set over the city. I gasped for air as I quickly approached the front door of the building I was going for, the lifeless steel wall that opened into a safe space, sitting quietly and silently as I closed in on it. I glanced around to see the thin fog sweeping through the city, the wave of light gray mist emitting... This is why I'm audio revising, because it sounds weird when you say it and not when you read it in your head. This book took 3 years to write. Of course there's mistakes. I turned to face the door and braced myself as I ran shoulder first into the locking mechanism. The door flew open, causing me to stumble forwards before crashing to the ground. I made it! I panted as I watched the heavy door slam shut behind me. The sounds of whispers filled the empty room I was in as the fog brushed against the bottom of the door. I took a deep breath before getting to my feet, brushing off my jeans as I looked around. The room I was in was covered with a dull white film of dust and mold spores, the scent of rotting concrete and mold filling my nose as my breath caught in my throat. The walls were made up of bumpy gray concrete and the floor was covered in unidentifiable stains and scratches. I stared at the cold gray concrete below my feet with a feeling of... I stared at the cold gray concrete below my feet with feelings of fear stemming from the deep scratches embedded in the ground. What? I shuddered. What made those indents? I choked as I began to think of about what actually lurked within this level. The smell of death filled the room as I glanced over at the door. The sounds of whispering had grown louder, now filling the entire city as it spread throughout the streets. The sounds of something wailing pierced my ears as I snapped out of it. This level isn't abandoned. Something dangerous lives here, I said as I slowly walked backwards away from the door in front of me. The sounds of scratching claws scraping against the road's asphalt pierced the air as I stumbled back, stopping as I stood against the far wall. It's scratching the road, like it's sharpening its claws. I choked as I stared at the door. The air grew freezing cold as the scratching stopped. Don't make any noise, I thought to myself as I stared at the door. The sounds of scratching started up again as the door slowly opened a bit, before slamming shut again. The air began to grow heavy again as the sounds grew further away, allowing me to relax just a bit. I have to get out of this level, I said as I looked around the empty room I was in. My eyes darted around frantically before landing on a rusted metal pipe covered in chunks of drywall and concrete. It had possibly fallen from the ceiling. But first, I need a weapon for whatever is scratching in the dark. I quickly darted over to the metal pipe, grabbing it with one hand as I pulled it from the rubble. My head spun as I looked around nervously, an intense feeling of paranoia and dread filling me to my core. It's time to start dealing with this place once and for all, I said sternly as I tried to push the overpowering aura of fear away. What are you? I muttered as I thought of the thing that had brushed past me just moments ago. My chest felt heavy as my thoughts raced down an empty track, my stomach churning as I walked towards the door. The distant sounds of claws on asphalt continued to rattle the streets as I pushed open the door and walked out into the dead of night. Dun dun dun.